Today we are going to talk about subject-verb agreement questions on the SAT. Here is an example of a subject-verb agreement question. First, you'll notice the question always says which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English. Second, you'll notice that all four choices are simply the same verb, but different conjugations of that verb. On the SAT, these questions appear on the reading section, which remember are modules 1 and 2 on the test. The reading section has 5 types of questions. First are vocab questions. Second are longer reading comprehension questions. Third are grammar questions. Fourth come transition words. And finally are rhetorical synthesis questions. The grammar questions are the types of questions that always have the subject-verb agreement questions. You can see the types of questions on the grammar questions include punctuation, verbs, pronoun choice, modifier placement, and apostrophes. The one that we are looking at are the verb questions. So I'm going to give you 2 processes to solve subject-verb agreement questions. First, the grammatical approach, and then second, a trick. The grammatical approach to solve subject-verb agreement questions would be to first find the subject. It is typically the earliest noun in the sentence. Then remove all other words from the sentence and test the subject next to your 4 choices. And finally, if you're unsure, replace a singular subject with the word it and a plural subject with the word they and test with your choices. Let's take a look at an example. This example here has this is the example I had shown earlier. First, we notice all 4 choices are the same verb, the verb to be, but different forms of that verb. Next, let's find the subject. The subject of this sentence is the word objects. What we do then is test the subject with all 4 verbs. First, we have objects was, then objects is, objects has been, and objects were. In this case, objects were is the only correct sounding answer. The other 3 do not work. Therefore, objects were reveals that D is the right answer. This grammatical approach requires that you find the subject, which can be tricky. So let's look at the other approach, which is a trick. First, on these questions, you do not need to find the subject. Instead, you test the word it next to your 4 choices. Keep track of how many words it works for. Then, test the word they next to your 4 choices. Keep track of how many they works for. If it works with 3 and they works with the remaining 1, your answer is the word they. Vice versa, if they works for 3 choices and it works with the remaining 1, your answer is the one that it works with. The success rate of this practice is above 95% when it works with 3 and they works with the remaining 1, or vice versa. They works with 3 and it works with the remaining 1. So let's look at how that could apply to this last question. Same exact question as before. We do not need to find the subject this time. We simply test the word it next to our 4 choices, they next to our 4 choices. So let's sound it out. It was, that works. It is, that works. It has been, that works. Versus they was, do not work. Or they was, does not work. They is, does not work. They has been, does not work. They were, does work. It works with 3. They works with the remaining choice. Therefore, the one that works with 1 is the right answer. Let's try another example. In this example, without needing to find the subject, we can test it and they next to our 4 choices. It were, no. It have been, no. It are, no, that does not work. It was works. They were, yes. They have been, that works. They are, that works. They was, does not work. One of them works with 3, one of them works with 1. The one that works with 1 is your right answer. Conversely, we could have found the subject, which is the word amplifying. Amplifying was. It's tougher to do that with an ing subject, but you could do something a little bit more familiar, like maybe playing soccer. Would you say playing soccer are my favorite activity or playing soccer is my favorite activity? We would use a singular verb if our subject was the word playing. And it's the same thing here with this ing word, amplifying. We would also uh, count that as a singular subject and use a singular conjugated form of the verb. I think it's easier to use the it and they trick, so let's try it again on another example. Here's another question. Let's test with the word it and the word they to our four choices. It hasn't been. That works. It wasn't. That works. It isn't. That works. It aren't. No, we would not say that. They hasn't been? No. They wasn't? No. They isn't? No. They aren't? Yes. It worked with the first three. They worked with the last one. Therefore, the answer is the last one, because that's the one that worked with one. If you wanted to find the subject of this sentence, it would be the word talents. Kind of a far way away from the blank, so it's easy to lose sight of that being the subject. If you found talents was the subject, you can put talents next to your four choices, and you would find talents aren't is the correct answer. Let's talk about when the trick doesn't work. Remember what I said. You have to test it next to all four choices. And if it works with three, and then test they with all four choices, and they only works with the remaining one, then the trick will always work. But if they works with four choices and it works with two, if it's anything different from three versus one, where all four choices are accounted for, three of them works with it, one of them works with they, or vice versa, if it's not that situation, you cannot use this trick. So in this example, it works with A, it looked. It works with B, it looks. It works with C, it is looking. Now, if they were to work with the choice D, then D would be correct. But they only works with A. They looked. Therefore, the trick cannot work here. If you wanted to try this one, reading the full sentence, author Madeline Langle, the answer here would be looking to create a suspenseful tone that draws the reader in, simply because we have commas in this sentence that form a non-essential element, a parentheses kind of element that is removable from the sentence. We need an ing verb here. So we can remove these words in between the commas. And what you're really trying to say in the sentence is this author begins her novel. We do not want a conjugated verb. We would want an ing form of the verb. So in this case, we cannot do the trick. We have to dive into the sentence. I hope that illustrates some of the tricks, some of the approach you can take with subject-verb agreement questions. Again, you can find the subject and put it next to the four choices, or the easier thing is to test it and they directly with our choices.